Hey everybody, it's Lee with the Bellevue Democrats. Welcome to our interview sessions. Today I am with Judith Clerjeune from TIRCC, which is the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition. She is the Campaigns and Advocacy Director, and today we're going to talk about the status of immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, kind of dispel some myths. There's so much misinformation out there about this subject, and there's a lot of people I don't think that understand really what an immigrant or refugee is. They want to say no, no, no to everybody that wants to come here, and this has been people have been able to come here for a long time. So we just kind of want to dispel some of those myths. And Judith, start out by telling me what you do for TIRCC.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. So again, my name is Judith Clerjeune. I am the Campaigns and Advocacy Director for TIRCC. And so I lead our advocacy team. And so I do a lot of the policy work at the state level. So a lot of the lobbying, defensive work at the state level, as well as working with national partners to push for different federal campaigns. So for example, federal immigration relief, DACA, etc. And also work with our organizing team to make sure that we are always centering our immigrant and refugee communities in our strategies as well as our campaigns.
So can you give me a breakdown of what the state law is right now in regards to refugees, immigrants, asylum seekers? Is the state laws a lot different from federal law?
So, immigration, broadly speaking, is a federal issue, right? So, the federal government is responsible for our immigration laws. Um, and so, whereas the state can pass different local policies that impact, um, the lives of immigrants and refugees, the federal government is the one who's responsible for um, for our immigration laws, who comes and leaves our country.
So there is a connection between federal and state, though. Just like the last couple of months, we've had some asylum seekers or coming into Chattanooga. Everybody's been talking about that. Supposedly in the middle of the night, unbeknownst to anybody. But the states know about this, right? I mean, states have to know where what the federal level is doing, or do
So
they?
I believe you're referring to the unaccompanied children situation in Chattanooga.
Yes.
Um, yes, so the unaccompanied children, that is a program under the Office of Refugee Resettlement, ORR, which again is a federal program.
Okay.
And so the federal government is responsible for providing shelter, making sure that the kids are reunited with their families. And so they may contract with different organizations or different states to provide shelter while the kids are being, transported to their families or to a family that can provide shelter or where they can be reunited with their loved ones.
Okay. So they get to contract out with organizations or people. Okay. Good deal. Now what is the difference between an immigrant, a refugee, and an asylum seeker?
Yeah. So great question. So, technically, all of those are immigrants. There are different pathways to come into the US, right? So our immigration system is primarily divided into three different pathways. So one, refugee resettlement, two, family reunification, family migration, and three, there's a lot of businesses that sponsor workers, so immigration. So refugee resettlement is a program that was established, I believe, 1960s, if not before, essentially providing refuge for communities and for people whose homes have been impacted by conflicts, by wars, national disasters, essentially people who are completely displaced from their homes. And so the program is in partnership with the UN, where refugees and refugee camps are, they are sent to different countries where they can find a new home. And so that is someone who's a refugee. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So what is different between that and say what we hear as like the seasonal workers that come that are allowed to come in and do work and then have to go back home?
So again, as you said, those are people who have been who are here for a specific time on a work visa through a company, and so they come for a specific purpose, and then their visa would end after that purpose.
So that's what the visa would be for. So the refugee and asylum seekers, though, is because of like war-torn areas, natural disaster areas. They're coming here for that.
Right. So a refugee is different legally from an asylum seeker, right? So everybody has the right to seek asylum. And so someone can show up at the border and seek asylum from persecution, from gang violence, from domestic violence. And so they would show up at a port of entry and ask to apply for asylum. A refugee is someone who has been, who has gone through the process, has been vetted, you know, medically and vetted. All their history has been vetted, and then they are placed in a particular country. And so refugees don't get to decide which country they are placed in. Rather, they are assigned to a particular country, depending on how many people that country is welcoming or resettling and all of that.
So we're not the only country that takes in refugees and asylum seekers. Yeah. I'm just trying to combat a lot of negativity I'm hearing, out about this issue. Is there such a thing as an illegal immigrant?
So there are a lot of ways that people become undocumented, right? The way that our immigration system is set up, one, there are very few ways for people to come into the country. And also, many people might come in the country with a visa, that visa expires, or they're not able to apply for a change in status, then they become undocumented. And so I think there's misconceptions around how people become undocumented. And a lot of that is due to the restrictions and inability for people to apply for change in status and apply for permanent residence or apply to become a citizen, right? I think a lot of people assume that there's just an application that everybody can fill if they want to become a citizen. There is not, right? There are thousands of people who would love to, become an American citizen, not have the fear of being separated from their families every day. But unfortunately, that just is not a reality, which is why we need Congress to take action. But yeah, so a lot of people either become undocumented because of a visa expiring or something, or there is just not a legal pathway for them to come into this country.
So probably at first everyone's documented at first when they come into the country, most of the time. And then through these situations, they become undocumented. But at one time they were.
For a lot of people, that is the case. There are people who, will come through through different borders, because again, people are seeking safety, people are seeking different economic opportunities for their families and their children. And so there is that too.
Now, do you guys, do you see an issue at the Mexican-U.S. border, or is this something that's kind of blown up that's always been there? Where do we take most of our refugees into the U.S.?
So the refugee resettlement program, right now, I believe the majority of refugees are coming from Myanmar or the Congo. So that's the refugee resettlement program. And so the border, what I will say is that we have a moral responsibility to really provide refuge for people who are fleeing and seeking refuge, right? We do have a system in place that people can show up at the border and seek asylum, right? That is the process. People have a right to seek asylum. And so yeah, that I would say that is the border situation, right? We have a responsibility to make sure that people are treated with dignity. People are allowed to seek asylum and participate in that process.
So, what do you think would be what is the obstacle that we're having that's in our way from restructuring the way people become American citizens?
That is a great question. So communities and organizations have been fighting for this for decades, right? For so long that we really need Congress to take action and provide a pathway for people. There are multiple bills right now going through Congress. For example, the Dream and Promise Act, which would provide a pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients as well as TPS holders. And TPS stands for Temporary Protected Status. Um, and so that has passed the House and now is in the Senate. We also have a worker bill, which would provide a pathway to citizenship for essential workers, right? So immigrants who have worked under the pandemic really worked to make sure that this country kept going. But they don't have a way to become American citizens. And so that bill would provide a pathway for essential workers. We also have, there's a farm worker bill, which would do a similar thing for farm workers who are feeding this country, but again, aren't able to stay here with their families or, without the fear of being separated. And so there are different bills right now that we really need to urge our elected officials, our senators and Congress folks to get behind, right? Because our families have been fighting for this for so long. And I think one thing that has been really emphasized under the pandemic is that as a state and as a community, if we are going to get through this, and the pandemic is not over, right? We really need to make sure all of our people, all of our communities have what they need. And, that includes the ability to not be afraid every day of whether you're going to be separated from your family, right? And so it's really important for us to really urge our elected officials to stand behind those legislation.
Do you keep that? Do you list that legislation on the TIRCC website?
So I don't believe it's listed right now, but I can share the bill numbers and all of that with you all.
Okay. Do you know those offhand? Do you know?
Not on top of my head.
Not right now.
If you do, I'll share it with you afterwards. But
Okay.
if you do look for the Dream and Promise Act,
Okay.
the Essential Worker Act, as well as the Farm Worker Bill, it will come up. But I can share the languages with you afterwards.
Are there other websites or resources that you like to go to find information?
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So we have a lot of national partners that we follow. So FIRM is one, the National Immigration Law Center. They provide a lot of updates on national immigration policy. So I like to follow those. They have good information. But I can also share more resources with you afterwards.
Okay, I'll get those from you and then I'll send them back out. So what do we need to do on a state level?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, refugee resettlement is something that was drastically reduced under the Trump administration, right? This country has a long history of resettling and welcoming refugees, around 100 to 90,000 per year. Unfortunately, under the past administration, that number was reduced to 15,000, right? So that meant hundreds of families were waiting in the pipeline to be reunited with their loved ones who were already in this country. And also, in the past, the state legislature has unfortunately sued the federal government to stop refugee resettlement in Tennessee. And I would say that is one of the things that we really need to make clear to the legislature, that Tennesseans, for the most part, are willing and able to welcome refugees in our communities, right? Tennesseans understand that people who are seeking refuge just need a home, just need a new place to call home and a new place to start over. And so really making sure our legislators understand that that is what we want as a state. And also that federal immigration relief is something that benefits our communities too, right? There are Tennesseans who are immigrants who have been here for decades, who have built their lives here, their children are here, they've gone to school here. And it's really not okay that they continue to live in fear and wonder, is tomorrow the day when I'm going to be separated with my mom or with my children? And so it's really our duty as a community to stand up for our neighbors and make sure that we're fighting and pushing for them to have a pathway to become a citizen.
Well, at least we do have a supportive governor when it comes to that. I mean, he has been supportive of refugee.
Yes. So Governor Lee in 2019, I believe, consented to keep Tennessee a welcoming state. And so we also hope that he will stand behind that decision and continue to be supportive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's not been supportive about some things, but at least he has had a heart for the refugees. So after somebody comes in, what do you guys help them do in TIRCC here in the state or in the city?
So we, as an organization, do not directly resettle refugees, right? We are primarily an advocacy and organizing organization. And so we work to really uplift the leadership of immigrants and refugees already in the state. So making sure that community leaders have the skills and have the tools necessary to advocate for themselves and their communities. I think there's, as you said, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of misinformation about who refugees are, who immigrants are, what they need. And so we really believe that refugees and immigrants should be the ones advocating for themselves and speaking about themselves.
So that's that would be federal. Then the resettlement and all that is still under federal, right? Under federal law.
Yes, refugee resettlement is under the federal government. Yes.
Okay. How should we approach our lawmakers and tell them? I mean, what do we need to say to them?
One, you can call them. If you need their numbers, there are a lot of different resources that will tell you who your legislator is, who your senator is, who your Congress folks are. But yeah, make sure you call them, send them an email, send them something on social media, let them know that you stand with refugees, you stand with immigrants, and that you also want them to vote in support of a lot of the immigration bills that are proposed in Congress right now, right? That we really need them to do the right thing and stand behind immigrants and pass legislation that will provide a pathway to citizenship.
Now, how does the pathway to citizenship differ now as say early, when the country was founded, all the people coming in, through Ellis Island and all the, people flooding in? How did they have a process to go to, or were they just able to come in and, set up a home and go to work? And why has it become so difficult?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our immigration laws have changed drastically since then. And yeah, right now it is a lot harder for someone to become an American citizen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys lobby, you have a lobbyist group that goes up to the General Assembly every year and talks to legislators?
Yes.
Awesome. Good deal. What else do we need to know about what you guys do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you want to stay in touch with our work, definitely sign up for our e-blast, sign up for our newsletters, and you can do that on the website, or follow us on social media. There's a lot of information, and there's a lot of ways that people can volunteer, or stay in touch with all of what's happening at the state legislature, as well as at the federal level. So I would say definitely sign up for our listserv and stay in touch with our social media so that you all can be updated.
Great. Well, it's great talking to you, and I'm going to talk to you afterwards and get that information. So thanks for being with us today. This is Judith Clerjeune from Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition, known as TIRCC. I think everybody knows TIRCC here. A lot of us out here in Bellevue know TIRCC. So anyway, we will get some information to you after this, and thanks for being with us.
All right. Thank you so much, Lee.